Hello there. We're going to transfer a Pathé record today. Quite an interesting size. Of course, records do come in all sizes. The smallest one, working record, that I know about is actually smaller than the label of this one. And they were made in 1924 by HMV for the Queen's doll's house. Then they made a tiny little gramophone, but you can see about that online. And those records, they do play, but they're really rather scarce for some unknown reason. And they get bigger, 6-inch, 8-inch, 9-inch, 10-inch, whatever size you like. And of course, you know, they go up to 16-inch, the Vitaphone type system, sound discs, and there are some 20-inch ones made by Pathé in Europe, and also Neophone in the UK, but they are almost mythically rare. I've never seen one, and I don't know anybody who's got one. That's really big. No, the size we're going to be dealing with today is the so-called 14-inch Pathé, and it's actually slightly less because it's a 35 centimetre record. The Pathé company, based in France, decided in about 1911 that it was no good having one aria from an opera here and then one on another disc done at another session and nothing else, and they said we must make something far more complete, and they did so. I think they did 6 operas, certainly 2 by Gounod, and Faust and Romeo and Juliet, and these were in large sets. One of them has 56 sides, that's 28 discs, and they came, they wouldn't have come cheap, but they came in the form of a box set, which I have one of here, and it weighs, mind you, somebody's made a wooden box. This isn't a Pathé box, but that box, which has got some records missing because the set of I've got has got 2 or 3 records missing, it weighs 42 pounds, which is 19 kilograms. So you know, that would have cost you quite a bit of money and quite hard to hump about. Yes, here's one of them. They've got a number to show you where it starts. On the other side they've got number 2. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't make automatically coupled sets, because I do know that they had a twin turntable machine, which if somebody had the sapphire there, they could kick off the next side and then go around and wind up the machine and get the next record ready. But this, what I've got set here, is manual coupling. So I thought we'd just transfer the Prelude of Romeo and Juliet. It's quite short, it's about 2.5 minutes. There's a little bit of a problem, it won't go on our record deck. That's because this switch is here. But it doesn't matter, because if we put on 1, 2, 3 12-inch records, and then the Pathé, it's raised up and will go now, missing the switch. So that's pretty good. Mind you, we can see that the record's quite warped, but I have tried this before. So here we go. We're using our usual DC7 software, and we're recording it, of course, in stereo. We can't hear much because it's a vertical cut record. The main thing we need to do is to make sure that it doesn't skip any grooves, because they're quite prone to do that. And of course we're using a recommended stylus for Pathé, which is an 8 thou ball sapphire. Mind you, if you've got Pathés, it's well worth trying a number of different styli. For example, I accidentally put the 002 truncated elliptical on this by accident, thinking it was the Pathé, and it did just as well as the Pathé, but that might not always be the case. So there's our file on the monitor, and there are 1 or 2, well, 12 or 15 quite big clicks in there, so they'll be easy to take out by hand. So we'll just do that, and off we go. We played the record at 90, just over 90 RPM. Because Pathé are notoriously nonchalant about the speed at which their discs are to be played, between 90 and 100 it says. Of course we'll get it a bit more accurate later on. Now we do want to put on some equalisation. I always like to do that on acoustic recordings, but because at the moment we can't hear very much, we'll have to perform the file conversion from vertical to lateral cut by using this function here, which is mono left minus right. And if you run that, it will convert it into this new file here, which we can hear better. By Jove, yes. By Jove, that sounds a bit hard and strong, doesn't it? But then again, of course, Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy, so it's got to have a kind of tragic, gripping prelude or introduction. So what sort of EQ could we put on it? Well, this looks pretty aggressive, and especially bearing in mind that at the bottom end we've got a lot of rumble which is associated with pathés, but we can take that out later. So I'm going to run this one. And here's our new file. It's actually thrown up some quite large clicks that I didn't take out originally, so I'll just manually remove those. But it now sounds like this. So to work. Well, for good or ill, there's our file. I'll play it to you all soon. I'll put a fade in and a fade out. But there's something very important we must do before we regard it as finished. Yes, that's a performance, the beginning of a performance at Salzburg Festival in 2008. And of course I'm not an expert on classical music, so I don't know what key Gounod's Romeo and Juliet begins in, but I can play that back. Yes, by playing it back on YouTube and with this nearby keyboard, we can see this. Well, it's obviously in D minor. It begins on a big D minor. So now we know that it wouldn't have altered. It wouldn't have altered. So we must get our Paris recording into the same key. So here we go to play our Paris recording. We find, okay, so what does this mean? It means that our Paris recording is in D flat instead of D. It's too slow. I played it at about 91 RPM and that wasn't fast enough, so we're going to have to adjust the speed to get it into D minor. I've set the Paris recording 5% faster, that's by trial and error, and now and that's done it. So now that we've got our side into the modern D minor, is that the end of it? Well, no, it isn't actually, because while the Salzburg Mozarteum Orchestra were probably using a pitch of A equals 443 Hertz, which I learned from Wikipedia is what tends to be used in Austria and Germany, My keyboard is international standard pitch, which is A440 and has been for many decades. But that's not likely to confuse what key the thing begins in. But the sting in the tail is that a century ago, when that Pathé record was made in Paris, they had another different pitch, which was lower. It was A equals 435 hertz, and I'm pretty sure that that orchestra would have observed that standard French pitch of 1911 or 1912. So I've just done some scribbling on a piece of paper, and I think what we need to do is reduce it by 1.2% just to drop it to A equals 435 instead of A equals 440. And, well, you know, then I think it should be okay. Well, if there's anyone still left watching this, there's one final closing comment. The transfer you're about to hear is rough and ready. It's not been digitally denoised, it's not been automatically decrackled, it's all been done manually, and it's rough and ready, and that's the way I like my sound, big and chunky. And if there's a lot of rumble underneath, which of course there is, because all Pathé records are dubs from cylinders, with all the attendant disadvantages. Also, of course, the orchestra that was playing in 1912 probably didn't have any cellos or double basses. It probably had euphoniums and tubas, because you couldn't get enough people round the recording horn to get the sound into the horn. If you had lots and lots of first and second violins and cellos, they would be so far away, many of them would be so far away that their sound would not get into the horn. So there was a lot of compromise in those days, and this isn't fashionable with a lot of people. They say these early recordings are, you know, grotesque. They don't sound like, they're not a proper orchestra. The orchestra isn't big enough. I've just described why you can't have an orchestra larger than so many people, because it's diminishing returns. The extra instrumentalists are further away, so their sound never reaches the horn. These recordings are what we've got, and this one rumbles a lot. It's still got a lot of crackle and hiss left on it, but you know, put on a pair of headphones and turn it up and let the old trombones, you know, the menacing trombones go, and I hope you like it.